Alright, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kaylin, and today I'm going to be going over study techniques and what to focus on for the CSCS. So I'll have notes up here, and I'm going to be going through 5 points for your study techniques and 3 points for what to know for the exam. So first of all, we're going to be going over study techniques. So the first thing that I would highly recommend is to get the textbook. Get the Essentials of Strength Training textbook and read through that. It's 24 chapters, it's kind of long. Get the newest edition because it's most applicable to the actual exam that you're taking. It's kind of long, but if you break it up, you can go through it really fast. I started studying on May 14th and I took the exam on June 6th. So that gave me about a little bit more than 3 weeks to study. I broke it up, so first of all, I printed out the pages. I had the digital version. If you can get the physical version, that'd be great. But I printed it out so that I could write on it. Writing helps me a lot when I study. So I printed out the textbook chapters, and each day I would go through 1 to 2 chapters. I just read through it, and that was it. It's not too hard, and you can really do that on your spare time. I would do that while I was doing some Zone 2 bike riding. I would bike for 40 to 60 minutes, and I just read as I did that. Or I would let that be my relaxation and rest time. I enjoy reading, so when I would rest, I would just sit on my bed and read through the chapter. If you're not really into reading, that's okay. I still highly recommend this resource because it has so much more than you think you would have to know. So when I heard about the CSCS, I thought I'd be able to take it right after I got my degree, because you need a bachelor's degree to take the exam. I thought that I'd be able to take the exam right after because it shouldn't be too hard, and I just got my bachelor's in kinesiology, and I just got my degree in kinesiology, so it should be pretty similar. However, as I read through the textbook, I realized how much stuff I didn't actually remember, and I realized how much new stuff that you actually have to learn. There's chapters on speed and agility, which is really foreign to me because I spent most of my life in a pool. So there is speed there, but it's different than running. There was plyometric chapters, which I was not really familiar with. And of course, there's the facility design and test protocol. All of these you kind of touch on. You barely touch on the facility design, but the test protocol, you touch on it during your undergrad. But there's a lot of stuff that you still don't know that the CSCS tests you on. So highly recommend the textbook. Second thing, as I said before, I had about 3 weeks to study, and I didn't want to overload. I didn't want to be super stressed in my last week right before the test. I wanted that to be time to review the stuff, take practice tests, figure out what I actually had to work on. So I gave myself about 2 weeks to read through the textbook. So 24 chapters, you got 14 days, so I read 1 to 2 chapters a day. I spread it out, so I made sure to read the assigned chapters for myself in order to stay on track. I would also, if you do make a study calendar, I would recommend giving yourself a day break or easy chapters. Combine the shorter chapters together, or give yourself a day break in the week so that you don't get too stressed out or too burnt out. In addition to that, scheduling your test date before you start studying is really motivational because you know that you've paid $400 to $500 for this test, so you really should pass it, and then you'll be able to push yourself to study until the test day rather than studying until you feel ready and then scheduling a test day. Third of all, one thing that I found really helpful for myself was compiling a cheat sheet. It was more like 34 pages of cheat sheet, but it was really helpful for me because I was able to zone in on the things that were really important and hard for me to memorize. These included tables and charts and graphs, as well as diagrams of like the muscle and pennation, but also I had youth guideline, periodization, and I had youth guideline. I had youth guidelines, periodization, nutrition guidelines. All of these are important to know for the exam and hard to memorize because they're in different places of the textbook. So when you pretty much take out what is important and put it onto a sheet, all of it next to each other, you're able to help your brain organize it a lot better than having so many words in front of you. The fourth thing that I found super helpful was watching videos. So I went online and I actually looked up how to pass the CSCS. And I expected videos like this, the one that I'm making, and I found some that were helpful, but I'm hoping that this video obviously will give you things that those videos didn't have that I found were useful for the test. So YouTube channels that I will link below are the movement system. That one was super helpful. They also have other videos that are not related to the CSCS, but are really interesting for running technique. They have plyometrics, they have agility tests. Those were the main things that were really difficult for me to memorize and also see when I was watching videos. So I would recommend watching videos and watching lecture videos too. There was a professor from Point Loma called Dr. Gooden, and his YouTube channel is also going to be below. His videos were super helpful, really engaging lectures as well as very clear, so you could understand the concepts that you don't understand as well when you read. One thing I also learned from my psych teacher back in high school was that you learn in different ways, and when you write, speak, read, and listen to the same material several times over, it's so much easier to absorb and to incorporate into your memory. So, as I said, I would write notes as I read the text, but I would also watch videos, and then I would actually share the information I learned. Whatever I thought was really interesting, I would share it with my friends or tell my family, or even I would be at the gym and I would see something related to like periodization, or my friend would ask me what is good nutrition guidelines, and I would force myself to practice reteaching the information that I learned. Anyway, all that to say, watch videos. That's a great way to help you learn. Lastly, I have practice. Lastly, my last tip for study techniques is to practice. So that could be practice exams, that could be practicing periodization, or reteaching the information to other people. This is super helpful, really helpful for me. It accommodates your learning styles, and also it helps you know what you need to work on. So for periodization, I thought that part had a lot of memorization. It was more prominent in the applied section of the exam, but you do have to know the sets and reps, you have to know volume, or you do have to know the volume, the intensity, and what season to do you have to know intensity, volume, and which season to do each type of training, as well as the different names for the seasons, because there's obviously off-season, pre-season, in-season, post-season, but also the NCSA, NSCA. But also the textbook will go over it in other terms, not for the typical athlete. So it calls it preparation, first transition, competition, and second transition. So all of these things take a lot of memorization, but when you practice it, it helps you memorize it a lot easier because you're able to see in front of you and force yourself to apply it. And it also makes a lot more sense to you after you write it down, because you'll realize, like, of course I'm not going to be doing high volume right before a competition, because then you're just going to be fatigued for the competition. You're going to be able to realize these things as you program. So I would highly recommend practicing the periodization part of the studying, but also practice exams are super helpful. So I took some short practice exams from this website. I don't remember what it's called, but there's, if you searched up CSCS practice exams, there's so many free ones. They're all like pretty short though, and kind of repeat the same questions, but it is helpful to have the questions written out for you, because when you read it, you think you know it, but when it's said in a question form, it can get a little bit confusing. So it's definitely helpful to do practice exams. Also, I took a practice exam 3 days before the test. I went into it super confident, and I got 60% on the applied portion, and that was like I got 60% on the applied. I got 60% on the applied portion, and that was definitely a wake-up call to really practice those and to be able to understand periodization and understand the form corrections. So anyway, so that's what I recommend for the study techniques. Now, as I just took the CSCS, that's why I'm making this video right now. I just took it yesterday, and I think that I just took the CSCS yesterday, so I'm making this video right now because everything's fresh in my head, and there are some things that I wanted to go over for you guys to help you guys, one, to keep you guys encouraged, but also to help you guys know what you have to study. So as I said, the applied portion was the hardest part for me, but some things that I realized as I took the test was, one, they talk about football a lot. I have almost never watched football. I've gone to 2 UCLA games, and that's it. So if you know football, good for you. I did not know anything about the positions, and that is something that cost me a few points, because they would ask questions about that and I had no idea what they're talking about. So you should know sports that you're unfamiliar with, at least the positions. So I'm a swimmer, so the swimming questions were really easy for me. But for example, the running and the football, and there's something about rugby, I didn't know anything about those. So definitely zone in on the sports that you're not really familiar with. Secondly, there were videos on the exam, as you probably expect, but these videos were actually surprisingly a lot easier for me to pick out the mistakes. I expected the videos to be very fast, for them to be full speed, and for them to be actual athletes doing the lifts or doing the sprints. So I thought that it was going to be really hard for me to pinpoint what was going on wrong, but it was actually a lot easier. It was just the staff from the NSCA, and they would just do the exercises, and it was super easy to point out what it was. So all that to say, you don't have to worry that much about the video portion, but still know proper lifting and running plyometric techniques. With that being said, the majority of the videos were actually related to Olympic lifting, weightlifting, plyometrics, and some sprinting. With that being said, the main videos on the applied portion of the test for me were actually related to Olympic lifting, weightlifting, and plyometrics. So I would highly recommend focusing on those exercises, especially if you're not familiar with it. I'm pretty familiar with Olympic lifting just because I've done it for a while and I've critiqued other people in Olympic lifting. But if you're not familiar with that, definitely watch videos of Olympic lifting and even try it by yourself. As I said earlier, you should practice the exams and the periodization, but one other thing to practice is actually the lifts. Practice, if you don't typically do weightlifting, I would encourage practicing Olympic lifts and practicing plyometric exercises so that you know how it feels and how it should look like. Thirdly, there's a lot of questions about periodization. I got some of those wrong, so definitely focus on that. As I said before, if you practice it, you will do a lot better than if you don't. So I practice a lot of periodization. If I did not, I would probably have failed that portion of the test. Lastly, there are some questions about test protocol, so I would recommend that you learn some Lastly, there are some questions about test protocols, so I would encourage you to study the protocol of the different speed tests and lifting, and there are actually all the tests should be in chapter 12 of the textbook. Chapter 12 or 13. I think chapter 13 of the textbook. So you should be able to read through the textbook, and if you still don't understand it, which some of them I really did not understand, or they just didn't stick in my head because there's just words and you have to visualize it. So what I did instead was I just looked up the name on YouTube